Right, wonderful. Here we are. The Seed, episode 2, and we have Matt, myself, and we have our wonderful guest today. We have Guillermo. Guillermo, can you give us the 20 seconds of you?
Sure. Thank you, Dan, for having me here. My name is Guillermo Flor. I'm a venture capital investor working at GoHub Ventures. And previously, I started my own startup, and I've been doing a lot of, stuff in the startup world for a long time. So happy to be here, Dan. Thank you.
A fellow ex-founder VC. We are becoming less rare, which is a wonderful thing, I think. So I'm going to bounce around some topics. I would love your insight and input. To start, Mads, you recommended that I listen to the All In pod this week. And I'm not a mega fan, as you know, but I listened and there were some really interesting topics. And one of them, which I wanted to throw into the pot, was this whole payback for this kind of AI bubble. Are we in a bubble? Is AI a bubble? And I was thinking, well, actually, no, because it's quite fundamental. But I think it was Chamath that brought up the point that the actual payback on all of these GPUs being bought by big tech is almost unpaybackable. I know that's not even a word, but there's almost not enough revenue, future revenue, to counteract the amount of expense going into this AI arms race. Now, Mad, starting with you, I know you listened to the episode. What's your take on that? Are we in an AI bubble based on that?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of Chamath, I think he took maybe a little bit of artistic license in terms of his calculations, but I think the fundamental point holds. There is a ton of capex that's going into AI and AI chips and hardware. And it's a little bit like the internet. There was a ton of capex that went into building out the internet in the late 90s. And sort of the chickens came home to roost with the dot-com bubble and then the bust. Where sort of we all figured out that, look, there's just so much capital that's been spent, and a lot of that is not going to be turned into revenue, and sort of valuations collapsed. But then we found out over time that the internet still turned out to be a super fundamental thing that transformed all sectors, all industries, and is with us everywhere. And some incredible businesses were built on the back of that. Now, it was not necessarily the companies that spent the capex that ended up reaping the reward, and maybe we're going to see some of that same thing here. Although I think people in general have wisened up to how fundamental it is, and try to position themselves well. So I think you're absolutely right on both counts. Yes, there's a bubble. Yes, many people are probably spending more than they should be, doing more than is warranted. Perhaps in this desperate attempt to try and be first and not being caught out flat-footed by missing out on the AI boom. And some of them will plow money into things that ultimately won't return a payback. And so I think, others, on the other hand, will be successful and will create a really good business. So I think we'll have both. Absolutely.
NVIDIA can't ship fast enough at the moment. I know that there's an arms race, and I thoroughly accept that point. But my feeling is that there's just so much inertia baked in. I think much to your point, Matt, there's just so much inertia baked in. We don't know how it's going to end. We know it's a fundamental transformative technology. Person from our group, Ivan was talking about, he listened to the CEO of Gong talking about the AI application in the sales function. And he was specifically saying that perhaps we're now going to see the rebirth of the almost like the solo sales guy or girl. So this wonderful AI technology is going to enable the vertical sales functions. So you'll be able to 10x you as a salesperson, do much more of what you normally do, but also do marketing and advertising and all of the other functions that wrap around the sales function. Mads, I don't know if you have any thoughts on, will AI transform the sales function like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, firstly, it's a super interesting proposition. Firstly, when I heard it, I thought it sounded a little bit odd because that's not how technology works, right? Generally, it's not that you have, technology leads to specialization. If you look at everything from the Industrial Revolution, what happens as we get more technology, it's not that you then have one person in a company who both manufactures things and sells them and does everything. You get lots of specialization when you have technology. That's generally how these things tend to work. But then there's another vector, another dynamic that I think will come in, which is that the kind of bots interacting with bots, which is sort of the interesting thing. So, kind of the idea, I think, from the gentleman from Gong was, can you have a situation where you have one sales rep who can do both, the marketing and the prospecting and finding, prospects and then doing the sales. But the other side of the equation, are you going to have bots that also are in charge of the procurement, which can fundamentally just change the nature of work, because now you have autonomous bots on both sides of the equation interacting with each other. And I just
My
don't
bot's
know
talking
if
to
we
your
can even
bots.
yeah, we cannot even imagine where that movie ends. I mean, of course we can, right? It's just kind of one person sitting on the top of an empire somewhere, pressing a button, and the whole world spins automatically. But that also doesn't intuitively feel right, or feels like what's going to happen.
I know that Eric Schmidt was talking about the moment to switch off the lights. He was saying, when my bot talks to your bot in their own language, that's the time to pull the plug. But Guy, have you got any thoughts on this? Because I'd also like to then start moving into your AI avatar. So my bot talking to your bot, perhaps with my AI avatar. What's your take?
I think we're going to see the situation, like we're going to see this already, like the situation of, your customer service bot talking to the sales bot of another company. That's going to happen for sure. But the way that I see AI, it's going to affect, the sales reps is that it's going to 10x the capabilities of the best sales, people. Because the way that AI works is like it's so generic that without a clear strategy of use, what is going to do is add a lot of noise to the market. So imagine like kind of like when you get a lot of LinkedIn messages of people doing outbound, it doesn't matter. Like you can get thousands of messages like that, but you might not interact with them, right? So it's going to be a matter of like with a bot you can automate that, but you're not going to get a response because it's going to be a lot of noise.
Do you wonder, because if you can use AI to capture the best from the best, surely that's going to democratize access to how you engage, who you engage with, the process, because you're going to get AI engines and co-pilots to share that knowledge across the organization. So my sense is that it's not going to necessarily accelerate the best, but it's going to democratize or pull up the worst. I mean that in the nicest possible way. But let's see. I was reading a creative report yesterday that was talking about AI within the written industry, within the creative industries in writing, so writing scripts and writing sales scripts, perhaps. And it was saying that the writers are doing more and they're doing better, but the content is becoming generic. Guy, this is one of your points. Is VC the best route for tech founders? What was on your mind?
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about this lately. Many founders that, raise VC, have like a successful exit, but down the road, because they have raised too much money and there were liquidation preference and stuff like that, they end up not getting a lot of money out in their exit. And so what I'm wondering is for the average tech founder, it's better to bootstrap a startup and like have access to those recurring revenues that if you are really cash efficient can benefit like you personally. And when is it a good idea to raise VC as a founder? How much do you need to raise, and how much equity do you need to keep to avoid being stuck in a company for 10 years and then exiting for $1 million?
I think it's not just money, it's control as well. I mean, there are a lot of challenges around control and VCs and their terms. But Mads, what's your take?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's absolutely not for everybody. And, if you're an average founder, whatever that means, of course you should not, raise venture capital. That would not be appropriate. I think few founders, I guess, would see themselves as average, and average can be measured in many different ways. But venture capital, and startups in general, it's a power law distribution. You have a few companies that do extremely well, and you have a lot that don't do very much. And so the average of that will not be a good outcome, neither for the investor nor for the founder, by the way. And so if there's venture capital that goes into that, it will be to the detriment of the investor and will be to the detriment of the founder. I think the truth is, we can't always know the outcome in advance. And there are situations where even very good founders end up with mediocre outcomes, simply just because that's the way things work. There might be 10 great teams that start on something at the same time, and there's going to be 1, 2, 3 winners in an industry.
there's one thing that I always remind teams that approach us for VC, which is I want to make sure they understand what VC really is. It's not a natural evolution for everybody to go friends and family, angel, venture capital. Guy, this goes on to another question that you kind of had in mind, which is, and maybe you can answer your own question around this pre-seed, seed, how much to raise, what is pre-seed? And it raised another question for me, which is, are those definitions out of date? Do pre-seed, seed, series A, B actually have any resonance now? Should we change the terminology? But did you unpack what you had in mind?
So the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic is because I see so many first-time founders, and I did this myself, trying to raise money without having developed like a product and having validated it in any way their business model. And I feel like what this creates is a sense of impatience and need for quick results that down the road is really bad for the business because it builds really low resilience, right? And so is it like, my question is, why would you raise a pre-seed round that you can bootstrap for a year or a couple of years and gain some MRR, and then if you want to scale the company, raise a bigger seed round with a higher valuation that dilutes you less?
Guy, I mean, I think you ask a good question. Why would you want to raise that money rather than bootstrapping? I think many technology sectors are winner takes all industries, and if you're onto something, and if the timing is right, and if you're too slow, you're not going to get to a leading position. And maybe you're happy building a sort of a really, really small lifestyle business, and that would be right for most people. Actually, that's the best outcome. But if your ambition is to build a global business, if your ambition is to do something that's truly transformative that touches lots of people, that's extremely hard to do without venture capital. And so that's why most of the large technology companies today were venture backed, because that is the way when you're onto something and you need the rocket fuel to move really fast to dominate a market, it's typically the only way to do that.
And you're in Valencia in Spain, so how is the startup ecosystem in Spain? I know something else that was on your mind is how Spanish startups can then migrate to the UK or into bigger markets. And obviously it's the same for us in the UK. How do our startups fundraise in the States? I think there's this possible constant track into the largest markets with the most capital, with the largest kind of potential for exit. So how do you work with your local teams, and then what's the advice around where they go and how they fundraise and how they really, really go global?
That's a great topic. And with regards to the Spanish market, I think last year's data in Spain, in the UK, there was 10 times more investment in venture capital than in Spain. And I think in Germany, it was more or less the same, a little bit less than the UK, right? Like, Spain is a really small market. And so what I see is that the startups that are built in Spain that have like a local mindset, they never get to grow because it's not a big enough market, right? And so the founders that actually have more options to succeed, the ones that like start as an international company right away, in getting clients, in like customers from outside of Spain, having like everything built in English, selling to the UK, to Germany, to the US, etc. Right? And so for funding is the same way, like, right? Like, there's little venture capital in Spain available. It's growing, but it's still nothing compared to Germany or the UK, and obviously not to the US. So
yeah, I think it's the same with us, and we are looking for global mindset founders. Obviously, there's more venture capital rolls through London than anywhere else in Europe, regardless of Brexit. But with Mads, we have a similar, not challenge, we have a similar opportunity in building in the UK and either coming back through Europe or heading to the States. And obviously, most of our founders want to go to the States. But what's your take on how they do it, or at what stage, or how they should think about going cross territory?
I think you should build with a global mindset from day one. You obviously want to prospect initially locally because there's so much power in meeting your prospect face to face and closing deals face to face. So I think if you're in Spain, try to close your first customer in Spain. If you're in the UK, try to close your first customer in the UK. It was an amazing big corporates in London. You just go and see your customers there and close them. But I think as soon as you have some traction, trying to figure out what the opportunity is in the US, you can do some initial selling remotely. But I think the sooner you get US traction, the sooner you prove that there's global potential for your business, the sooner you'll be able to raise capital to go global and tap into the US market. And I think that just positions you so much better vis-a-vis other competitors.
I want to lean into politics, but without getting into politics. So it looks like we're going to have a Trump administration in November. And the specific question is, what will a Trump administration mean for European venture, if anything? And Mads, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I think, at a high level, tension on the macro scale, US versus China will mean that there will be kind of probably more adversarial language, more trade conflict, and that will make it even harder for European startups to sell into the Chinese market. I think it's probably the sort of the main issue as I see it. Huge questions around what will happen with Russia and Ukraine and how, Trump, he's promised he can solve that conflict in 24 hours. Remains to be seen how he would do that. Obviously, if that conflict can be solved, that will be huge and hugely important for Europe, not just for startups. Beyond that, I'm not sure it will have a huge impact on us in the software industry. We can sell software as not really restricted by the same trade embargoes and sort of trade tariffs and other things as other industries. On the hard tech side, possibly more. There are issues around potentially automotive, which could be impacted. Could that have an impact on some deep tech businesses that sell into automotive? There's some supply chain implications. But I think, kind of thinking about Trump as the likely next US president, I don't think the first vector I would come from is the startup vector. I think there's sort of more, what does it mean for macro and global and just the world at large?
Yeah, I just figured there would be a slight, he's going to, obviously, there's going to be the whole tariffs piece, there's going to be the conflict piece, and I'm sure there's going to be some very, angry rhetoric. But it also felt like if you looked at Bitcoin prices or you looked at all of those kind of little markers that are looking for a possible Trump presidency, and I know Silicon Valley is pretty much backing him now fully, got Hollywood going Biden, and you've got Silicon Valley, you've got Northern California going Trump, because he's going to probably have a positive impact on markets and freer trade and lower taxes and more aggression. So that kind of made me think, well, maybe there's going to be a bit of an unlock in the IPOs, a bit of an unlock in that American fluidity, which then may well have a knock-on effect into the activity going on over there, buying UK startups, buying European startups. I was thinking, and I think that feels fairly instant. It feels fairly aggressive.
Yeah, I don't know if trade is going to be freer, but M&A likely will be freer because you're going to have a new regime around kind of M&A and antitrust. And so, yes, that could open up for more trade sales. And yes, there's a longer term implication around that. I think that's something that would come anyway, Trump or not. I think the pendulum has swung too far in one direction, but he will certainly accelerate it, or Trump administration would accelerate that.
Interesting. Guy, does this affect you down in Spain? How do you think about it? Or do you think about it?
Well, I don't know how it could affect Spain, but yeah, I see it similar to what you guys say. I think Trump's policy is going to be a little bit protectionist, like towards the US, right? And it's going to higher the tariffs to I think as Matt say, like automotive from China. I know China's already building several factories in Mexico as well, so that they might look into that as well to try to tax those imports as well. And so like looking at the indexes, like they just skyrocket after the Trump's assassination attempt.
Interesting time. Maybe there's this kind of blend of isolationism and trade, and we'll just see how it plays out and see how it affects us. Staying political, I was watching the King's speech the other day. So the King opened the House of Parliament, and part of his mandate is to share the policies of the new government. So I'm thinking about 3,000, there were 20, 25, 35 new policies or so. But there was no mention of AI.
Yeah, so I think he mentioned it briefly, but there was no legislation backing that up, and I think there was an expectation around the new AI bill. And so, what the government has said is, look, there was no new AI bill because there were two other urgent bills that had to be sponsored. One around the digital information and smart data, which actually is, I think, is going to be quite an important bill. It's going to enable a digital verification service, which is an area where the UK is just a decade or more behind other European countries in
Is this
terms of
ID
having
cards?
one
Is this the
sort
same
of
as the old ID
yeah.
card thing?
Well, so ID card is a 15, 20-year-old idea. I mean, this is effectively enabling all citizens to use a digital ID to verify themselves with government services. Today, the government still sends letters around. It's it's quite last century, and where other countries have gone completely digital. In many countries, you have no forms of paper at all. Everything is digital, but you need a digital verification service to do that. And so there's a bill that's going to go through Parliament to support that. So I think that's actually hugely important. There are other aspects of that bill. One is around enabling scientists to get broader consents in areas when they do scientific research. That can be really important because you can imagine if you need to seek consents from lots of different people to do a piece of research, that can slow down that research. And so again, this is about making the UK, more modern and making it able to be at the forefront of research and technology. There was a separate bill that was released on cybersecurity. Previously, we've been following the EU directives on this. The last regulation was from 2018, but there was now a new bill that's been put forward around cybersecurity, especially around, making it better, making it easier to prevent ransomware and cyber attacks. So again, I think this was important. They are talking about an AI bill being put forward. I think, as we've talked about before on the pod here, the UK has had a fairly permissive regime when it comes to AI research, which has been very important. And I think there is some fear that a new piece of legislation could slow that down or could put us, at a disadvantage. So it remains to be seen what will be in that legislation when it's proposed. But as you said, it did not come out last, in the King's Speech.
Guy, what is the local regulatory supportive regime about AI down in Spain? Is it spoken about at a government or regulatory or legal level?
I think right now, I don't know if they've approved any regulation regarding directly AI. I think there is something, but the data protection, it has a lot to do with it because in the end of the day, AI deals with a lot of data. And I did see how this is already affecting the European Union. I think yesterday there was some news that Meta's new LLM model is not going to be released in Europe, basically because of the regulation.
Well, maybe Brexit will be a good thing then. Maybe this will be the one benefit of Brexit is that the UK can make different decisions. I wonder how aligned to the EU they'll have to be.
Yeah, we never know the counterfactual. I think that one of the reasons why many of the Northern European countries, Germany and others, were very keen to keep UK in the EU was because the UK was often a voice of free trade and a voice of having sort of, a very commercial approach to things. And so, my proposition would be that this AI Act would have looked very different if the UK had still been a member. And that would have been a benefit, not just for the EU, but also for the UK, because the EU is still our biggest market. And so the challenge we have today is even if we have a more permissive regime, we still have to sell to the rest of Europe. But we now have no influence in the legislation and the regulation that is adopted there, and we often have to follow it anyway. So I think it's a double whammy for us. It's possible that you could find areas where having a more permissive regime will be a benefit, but I would rather have had a more permissive regime for all of Europe than just for the UK, if that makes sense.
Last thing, I know, Matt, this is your point. Going back to the moon, should we?
I think this is such an exciting thing. I mean, the FT ran a big feature on it. Should we go back to space? And I think the exciting thing about humanity is that when we have to overcome extremes, when we face adversity, we become so creative. And there were so many scientific advances that came out of the Apollo mission and the last moon landings. And so beside the knowledge of space travel and creating spacecrafts, there was also so many things we use today, like digital image processing, like LED technology, enhanced water purification. Even simple things like scratch-resistant lenses we use on optics today were developed, for astronauts' visors. Lots of development around solar energy and photovoltaics and CMOS sensors that we use in our camera phones. All this stuff is stuff that's 50, 60 years old that came out of the Apollo program. And so I think, setting ourselves these ambitious targets of trying to, reach new frontiers and cross them and go beyond just marshals the best in us. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about kind of these upcoming missions to get back to the moon.
Pete, should we go to the moon?
I'm with Max on this one as well. I see a reason why not. Let's do it. Come on.
Oh, well, listen, that was lovely. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.